Hey, I'm Jack Hyber, today we're taking a deep look at one of the most strategically significant and most secretly executed military construction projects happening anywhere on the planet right now. Ream Naval Base, Cambodia, a name that barely registered on the radar of Western defense analysts 5 years ago.
Somewhere on the Gulf of Thailand, in a tiny Southeast Asian nation most Americans couldn't point to on a map, China just pulled off one of the most audacious military construction projects of the 21st century. Right under the watchful eyes of U.S. satellites, U.S. intelligence agencies, and the entire Indo-Pacific Command, Beijing quietly, methodically, and brilliantly transformed a rusting, forgotten Cambodian naval outpost into what could become China's first overseas military installation in the Western Hemisphere's backyard. We're talking about a base that, when fully operational, sits just 1,200 kilometers from Vietnam, within striking distance of critical Indo-Pacific shipping lanes, carrying over $5 trillion in global trade every single year. And the most insane part? Cambodia said it was just a renovation, a friendly infrastructure gift, nothing to see here. This is the story of how China built a naval superbase hiding in plain sight, and what it means for every nation on Earth. Today, it's the subject of emergency Pentagon briefings, congressional hearings, and satellite surveillance operations running 24 hours a day. See, the old Ream Base was a joke, a relic. Cambodia's entire navy consisted of a handful of small patrol boats, some corrugated tin-roofed buildings baking in the tropical heat, and a pier that looked like it was held together by rust and optimism. This is what it looks like today, and the transformation is absolutely insane. We're going to break down every layer of this story, the engineering, the geopolitics, the secrets, the construction nightmares, and the billion-dollar question the U.S. military is desperately trying to answer. Is this base about to change the palace of power in Asia forever? Let's get into it. To understand how China pulled this off, you first have to understand the relationship between Beijing and Phnom Penh, because this isn't a story about force, it's a story about leverage. Cambodia's entire GDP is roughly $30 billion a year. China's is over $18 trillion. That's not a partnership, that's a gravitational pull. Over the past 2 decades, China has poured an estimated $10 billion into Cambodia through infrastructure loans, grants, and direct investment. Roads, bridges, airports, hydroelectric dams, entire resort developments along the Cambodian coastline funded by Chinese money. And Prime Minister Hun Sen, who ruled Cambodia with an iron grip for nearly 4 decades before handing power to his son Hun Manet in 2023, was famously, openly, aggressively pro-Beijing. He once called China Cambodia's most trustworthy friend. So when China came knocking with an offer to renovate and upgrade Ream Naval Base, a facility Cambodia could barely afford to maintain, Hun Sen said yes. Of course he said yes. In 2019, Reuters and later the Wall Street Journal published bombshell reports. They'd obtained documents suggesting Cambodia and China had signed a secret agreement granting China exclusive use of part of Ream Naval Base for 30 years.
This is fake
Naval berthing rights, troop deployment rights, storage rights. Cambodia denied it furiously. Hun Sen called it fake news. He invited foreign ambassadors to tour the base as a PR move. He even, and this is extraordinary, ordered the demolition of 2 U.S.-funded buildings at the base in what many analysts interpreted as a pointed message to Washington. But then the satellite images started coming in, and they told a very different story. Okay, this is the part I love. Let's get into the actual engineering of what China has been building here, because it is a masterclass in military construction capability. When you compare satellite images from 2019 to 2024, the transformation is staggering. We're talking about construction activity on a scale that simply doesn't match a routine renovation. The Gulf of Thailand in this region is relatively shallow. too shallow for large naval vessels, including destroyers, frigates, or amphibious assault ships. Think of it like this. Imagine you have a swimming pool, but it's only 4 feet deep. You can splash around in it, but you can't swim. China needed to make that pool deep enough for a battleship. So Chinese engineering teams, using massive cutter suction dredgers, the same class of vessels that built China's artificial islands in the South China Sea, began systematically removing millions of cubic meters of seabed sediment from Ream's harbor. We're talking about excavating a channel deep enough to accommodate vessels with drafts of potentially 8 to 10 meters. That's deep enough for a Type 052D guided missile destroyer, one of China's most advanced warships. That is not renovation. That is military-grade harbor engineering. Simultaneously, a new pier structure began taking shape along the northern section of the base, and this pier is not sized for Cambodian patrol boats. Satellite measurements from analysts at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, CSIS, suggest the new pier is approximately 363 meters long. That's nearly 1,200 feet. That pier is longer than a Nimitz-class aircraft carrier. Now, could it berth a carrier? Probably not, given the harbor depth, but a fleet of destroyers, submarines, and support vessels? Absolutely. The construction technique here mirrors exactly what China used at its overseas base in Djibouti, Africa, its first officially acknowledged overseas military installation. Precast concrete caissons manufactured off-site, towed into position, sunk, and then built upon. It's fast, it's modular, and it's precise. Each caisson, essentially a massive hollow concrete box, is designed to interlock with its neighbor, creating a continuous load-bearing pier structure capable of handling the weight of fully loaded naval vessels. We're talking structures engineered to withstand tropical storm surge, tidal variation, and the mechanical stress of vessels displacing thousands of tons. But a pier is useless without the infrastructure to support the vessels using it. And this is where the satellite imagery gets really alarming for U.S. defense planners. Analysts have also identified what appears to be a signals intelligence facility, recognizable by distinctive antenna arrays, as well as expanded barracks capacity, suggesting a permanent Chinese military presence far larger than any technical advisory mission would require. And perhaps most critically, radar installations. Multiple new radar arrays have been identified that would give whoever is operating them comprehensive surveillance coverage over a massive swath of the Gulf of Thailand, including shipping lanes used by U.S. Navy vessels transiting the region. This is the engineering reality of Ream Base in 2024. It's not a renovation, it's a forward operating base, and it was built with breathtaking speed and efficiency. Now let's zoom out, because the why behind all of this engineering is what keeps admirals in Washington losing sleep at night. Every single year, ships carrying over $5 trillion in global trade pass through the waters surrounding Southeast Asia. The Strait of Malacca alone, just a few hundred kilometers from Ream, handles roughly 25% of all global maritime trade. That's 200 million tons of cargo annually, including a massive percentage of the oil and liquid natural
The U.S.
gas
maintains
that
the
powers
first island
Japan,
chain to project
South
power
Korea,
and contain
Australia,
China. Ream Naval
and
Base
critically,
sits outside
U.S.
this
military
chain.
operations
This lets
in the
Chinese
Pacific.
vessels access the Indian Ocean, bypassing U.S. surveillance. Home to critical U.S. and allied supply and communication routes, without ever having to run the gauntlet of U.S. surveillance and interdiction assets in the Pacific. To put it in plain terms, a Chinese naval presence at Ream Base is like someone quietly moving a chess piece to a square that threatens the entire board, and doing it while everyone's watching the other pieces. The U.S. response has been significant. Pentagon officials have publicly called Ream a potential Chinese military installation.
We are repositioning assets to maintain stability.
A term they choose very carefully. U.S. Indo-Pacific Command has repositioned surveillance assets. There have been direct diplomatic protests to Cambodia, and Congress has moved to restrict certain forms of U.S. military aid to Phnom Penh as a consequence. But here's the brutal geopolitical reality. Cambodia is a sovereign nation. China says it's just helping a friend, and under international law, there is precious little the United States can legally do to stop it. Now, every megaproject has its shadows, and Ream Naval Base has plenty. Let's talk about what Cambodia and China don't want you to know. In 2020, Cambodia demolished 2 buildings at Ream Naval Base that had been funded and built by the United States as part of a maritime security cooperation program. The official reason? They were old and in disrepair. But U.S. officials and multiple independent analysts noted the timing was suspicious. The demolitions came immediately after Cambodian officials invited foreign observers for a transparency tour. The buildings that were demolished were precisely the ones positioned to observe the areas of the base where new construction activity was most concentrated. Whether that was deliberate or coincidental, the message it sent to Washington was unmistakable. Here's something that rarely makes international headlines. The workers building Ream Base aren't Cambodian construction workers getting well-paying local jobs. Multiple investigative reports and intelligence assessments have suggested that the primary construction workforce at Ream has been Chinese nationals, brought in directly from China, living in on-site accommodation and operating with minimal interaction with local Cambodian communities. This matters for several reasons. It means the technical knowledge of exactly what is being built stays in a closed loop. Local Cambodian workers, journalists, and observers have extremely limited access to the construction zone. And for the fishing communities and villages along the Gulf of Thailand coastline near Ream, communities that have fished these waters for generations, the construction activity, the harbor dredging, and the restricted access zones have caused real, tangible disruption to their livelihoods.
There are documented reports of fishing grounds being declared off-limits, of traditional coastal access routes being closed, of an entire way of life being quietly bulldozed along with the mangroves at the water's edge. These aren't statistics. These are families, fishermen who wake up before dawn the same way their fathers and grandfathers did, and now find their boats turned away from waters their community has worked for 100 years. That human cost rarely appears in the Pentagon briefings, but it's real. Here's the financial nightmare hiding beneath the surface of this whole story. Cambodia's debt to China is not fully transparent. Large portions of Chinese infrastructure financing in Cambodia operate through mechanisms that make it genuinely difficult for independent auditors or even the Cambodian government's own finance ministry to track the full terms. We've seen this playbook before. In Sri Lanka, China financed the construction of Hambantota Port, a project that struggled commercially, and when Sri Lanka couldn't service its debt, China negotiated a 99-year lease on the port in 2017, a sovereign piece of Sri Lankan territory handed to Beijing for a century. Defense analysts openly wonder, is Cambodia sleepwalking into a similar arrangement with Ream? What exactly are the terms of whatever agreement exists between Phnom Penh and Beijing regarding this base? And if Cambodia ever wanted to walk away, could it? The honest answer is we don't fully know, because the agreement, if it exists as leaked documents suggest, has never been made public. So, what is America actually doing about this? The United States has been quietly, and not so quietly, accelerating its own strategic moves across Southeast Asia in direct response to Ream. In the Philippines, after years of restricted access, the U.S. has negotiated expanded basing rights at 4 additional Philippine military installations under the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, EDCA. These bases are positioned to directly complicate Chinese naval operations in the South China Sea. In Vietnam, a nation with its own deep historical tensions with China, military-to-military relationships with the U.S. have been quietly expanding. In 2023, President Biden and Vietnamese General Secretary Nguyen Phu Trong elevated U.S.-Vietnam relations to a comprehensive strategic partnership, the highest tier in Vietnam's diplomatic framework. Australia and the U.S. are pushing forward AUKUS, the submarine technology sharing deal that will eventually give Australia nuclear-powered submarines operating in Pacific and Indian Ocean waters. That program represents a $368 billion commitment over its lifetime. The diplomatic fallout is already spreading. ASEAN nations are watching nervously. Thailand, Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia all have significant Chinese investments, all have coastlines on the South China Sea, and all are now wondering, are we next? This is the domino theory of the 21st century. Not communist regimes falling, but sovereign nations quietly, voluntarily handing strategic territory to Beijing, not through conquest, but through contracts, not through war, but through debt. The tragedy is that most of these nations have no choice. They're trapped between a superpower that offers security but demands allegiance, and another superpower that offers development but demands sovereignty. For small nations, choosing is not a luxury, it's survival. Some analysts argue we're witnessing the birth of a new world order, not bipolar like the Cold War, not unipolar like the 1990s, but something messier. A world where spheres of influence overlap and collide, where small nations play great powers against each other, and where military bases like Ream become the new chess pieces. For Cambodia, the calculus is brutally simple. China offers what the West never did: respect, investment, and no lectures about human rights or democracy. In return, Cambodia offers what China needs: strategic location, sovereign territory, and silence. And so the base grows, day by day, week by week, month by month by month. Each new concrete caisson lowered into place is a statement: China is here to stay. Each new radar array rotating on the hilltop is a message: China is watching. Each new warship that eventually docks will be a warning: China has arrived. The question the West keeps asking itself, how did we let this happen, misses the point entirely. This isn't about Western failure, it's about Chinese success. While the West debated, China built. While the West studied, China acted. While the West formed committees, China formed concrete. The Ream Naval Base is not just a military installation, it's a monument to a different way of thinking about power. Power, in the Chinese view, is not something you project, it's something you accumulate, slowly, patiently, relentlessly, until one day you look up and realize the other side doesn't have any left. This is the lesson of Ream, not about ships or piers or radar arrays, about patience, about persistence, about playing the long game while your opponent plays the next news cycle. China is thinking in decades, the West is thinking in deadlines, and in the end, decades always win. So where does this leave us? Ream Naval Base exists, it's real, it's operational, and it's not going anywhere. Cambodia has what it wanted: Chinese investment and protection. China has what it wanted: a strategic foothold in America's backyard. And the United States has what it never wanted: a peer competitor operating from within its sphere of influence. The game has changed, not because of some dramatic confrontation or spectacular event, but because one player simply refused to lose. China looked at the board, saw where it was weak, and started building. Not ships it couldn't afford, not weapons it couldn't use, but bases it couldn't be kicked out of. Concrete sovereignty, permanent presence, the ultimate power move. The question now is not whether China will have overseas bases. It already does. The question is, who's next? Which nation will be the next?
The question now is not whether China will have overseas bases. It already does. Question next: which nation will be the next to trade sovereignty for survival creep? And the pouring never stopped.
Every frame in this video has been crafted through a multi-stage documentary production process from original research and script development to AI cinematic visualization and professional editing. Human creativity guides every step. A digital documentary host and advanced visual tools are used to clearly explain complex mega projects, engineering, and global infrastructure. This channel is dedicated to original documentary storytelling and follows all EU policies regarding AI-assisted and synthetic media, ensuring the informative, unique, and monetization-friendly content.